Hi, I'm Zephyr, and I'm grateful for a bright sunny day today. This is going to be a little bit of a tutorial on how to make a true one-match campfire, meaning you're going to know how to be safe, what materials you need, and how to set them up so that with one match, you're good for the rest of the night. But first, always comes safety. I've got a fireplace here in my backyard that is nice and set up and dug into the ground a little bit. Nice ring of stones, that's all great. I also have a bucket full of water. If you're at home, hose is great. I have one just off camera, but I always like to have a bucket as well, just to be extra safe. If you're in the woods, you should have some sort of water, or if it's winter, snow, or something that you can put the fire out with at any moment. Also need to clear the space around your fire pit. It should be at least 6 feet from fire pit that there is any sort of dangerous small flammable material. Still living grass, green plants, those aren't as much of a hazard, but things like dry leaves or a lot of sticks, which of course I have here, but those are going to go in the pit pretty soon. Those things need to be cleared away at least 6 feet back. And lastly, always check the fire danger for wherever you are. You can usually find it with a quick Google. Just search fire danger and enter your location. You'll usually find some sort of report that will tell you whether the conditions are safe to have a fire. Where I am right now, they are, I believe, in low or moderate, which means I should be aware, but it's not super dangerous either. So, with that, what are the materials we need? Well, when constructing your fire, it's nice to break down the things that are going to burn into different components. I like to think of, when you're setting the fire up, 4 key elements: tinder, wispies, pencils, and thumbs. So your tinder is just that first thing that's going to light. This is what you're touching the match to. Tinder can be a lot of different materials, but they all have some shared properties, i.e. they need to be thin materials, such as this grapevine here that I have, or grapevine bark, that I have processed to be nice and fluffy and fibrous, and this will take a match, this will take an ember very easily. Unprocessed, this is what grapevine bark looks like. It's just kind of a thick, kind of woody strip, but you just rub it a bit. You'll lose a lot of material in the process, as you can see from the enormous amount being shed. And I would even go further, but it already is becoming quite fibrous and usable. And then I've got some paper birch bark here. Similarly, you can see it's thin, it is kind of fluffy. This will catch really easily. And paper birch is incredibly useful. It's got a lot of properties, which I'm not going to go into here, but it's an incredibly useful tool for making fires. Unprocessed, it, as you can see, it kind of looks like a piece of paper. But it just sort of peels apart, and you get these nice, fine, thin strips, which light up incredibly easily for whatever tool you are using to light your fire. In this case, I'm using a match. Now, I mentioned paper birch bark, which is great, but I want to really mention, again, going back to safety, paper is a really popular thing to use to start a fire with, but in an outdoor fire, it is never a safe idea. Paper is extremely light. What tends to happen is it will light on fire, and at least a few pieces will float away from just the thermals of the fire you've lit. And while generally nothing happens with those, they can be a fire hazard. They can start forest fires. So I recommend never using paper, except perhaps in winter when there's snow on the ground. And for similar reasons, avoid leaves. They also don't tend to make great tinder for the most part, but they will float away and become fire hazards elsewhere. A little bit more okay in the winter if you're in a place that has snow on the ground, but especially since I'm in summer and hasn't rained in a few days here, I'm definitely not going to be using any leaves or any paper, just these nice natural materials that I've got here. So that's tinder. Next, what do I mean by wispies? Well, wispies are whatever the finest, smallest, teeniest sticks you can find in your area are. I live near eastern hemlock, which grows these kind of astoundingly thin branches, and then it sheds them. And they're easy to break off, you can get them off the ground, and they are dry and light up like nobody's business. This is great. You may not be able to find any trees that have branches this thin, but whatever those smallest branches you can find are, those are your wispies. And the rule of thumb for those is that you want them to be enough that you could wrap both hands around your bundle and just barely be able to reach fingertips. And this is actually longer than I am going to want them, so I'm going to break this in half, and I'm going to have pretty much double what I actually need here. But with fire, less is not more. More is more. Less is less. So more materials is never going to hurt your cause when it comes to making a fire. Next, we have pencils. So called because they're sticks about the size of a pencil in width. In terms of length, pretty much all these sticks, you're probably looking at maybe about the length of your forearm is a good gauge. You don't want to go too small because it's hard to build the structure if it's too small, and you don't want to go too big because it's hard to keep all of your wood together. So about forearm length, but a little bit longer, a little bit shorter is fine. This is my bundle of pencils. Again, about enough so that you can fully wrap both hands around and barely touch. I actually can't quite touch my fingertips, which is a good sign. I got plenty of materials here. And lastly, thumbs. You're probably going to be able to guess how that name comes from. It's about the width of your thumb. Again, a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, it's fine. This is not an exact science. It's just sort of a guideline. And here, I have my pile. Again, both hands fully wrapped around, can barely touch fingertips. Great, I've got plenty. What I didn't mention about the tinder, your rule of thumb for how much tinder you want is about a fist. Your tinder bundle, as I'll show you how to make in a second, should be about the size of your fist. Because I have two materials here, I'm going to use both of them. Sometimes people will refer to their tinder bundle as a nest because, well, it looks like a nest when you put your finest material, which in this case is my grapevine, inside of your coarser material and kind of try to craft it into a gentle little bundle nest-shaped thing. This is especially useful if you're lighting this with a coal, but since we're using a match, it doesn't really matter if it's nest-shaped. It just needs to be a nice, tight bundle. You don't want those materials to be like a big, messy pile. So, got that there. And now, how do I construct them together? So there's a lot of ways to put your materials together. There is something called a log cabin, which is just logs arranged kind of Lincoln log style. And that is a great way to put together a fire, but I find that works much better if you're making a big fire right off the bat, like a cooking fire. And it's also not a great way to learn how to put together your materials, so I'm not going to talk about that one today. There's also kind of the pile-up method, which is just you light each material and slowly add them as things start to burn. And that is actually a great method. That's how I learned to make a one-match fire. But it doesn't really show you structure, and there's a lot of reasons why it can be better to make a teepee, such as if you make a nice big teepee with lots of materials on it, if it's a rainy day, that rain can't get to your tinder that hopefully you've been keeping dry, and it will actually be more likely to light and not get put out by the rain while you're lighting it. Lots of other reasons to go for a teepee style, and that's what I'm going to go for today. A lot of people, when making a teepee fire, will try and be like really precise and put one stick down at a time, and I mean that's great. If you want to do it that way, you are welcome, but I have never really cared for that level of precision. Instead, I break my sticks in half, plant them down. I'm not really trying to get them in the ground, I'm just trying to get them stable. And it's about half my materials. Take this half, get those down. As you can see, they're all kind of meeting at the top, which is going to be where the flames are going to rise into. My concern right now is not trying to make anything look neat. It's just trying to keep my materials together. And I've created a little bit of space for where I can put my tinder bundle, because that's actually the last thing we're going to put inside. So next, my pencils. Once again, I'm going to have kind of two groups of sticks here. I'll lay them down. Want them to be close to each other, but not too close. Because we need space for aeration. Lastly, our thumbs. Do this even more carefully because I don't want to collapse the whole thing. Just put a few on at a time all around the whole structure. And make sure the whole thing has plenty of fuel, especially at the top, because again, that's where the most stuff is meeting. That's where the flames are going to go, because heat rises. And we want to make sure it rises to food. And lastly, we'll put our tinder bundle in. But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of how fires work. Not the deep science, because frankly, I don't understand that myself, but just the basic principles. Because a fire needs three things. Fire needs fuel, which in this case is wood and bark. A fire needs oxygen, which is, around the air already. And a fire needs heat/ignition. And that's where our match is going to come in. The perfect fire is at the center of those three things coming together. If there's not enough heat compared to the amount of fuel and oxygen, it's not going to burn very well. If there's not enough fuel compared to the oxygen and heat, then it's going to burn out and die. If there's not enough oxygen compared to the amount of heat or fuel, you're going to have much less heat, and well, the fuel will stick around. And that's why the teepee is such a nice design, because it really promotes aeration happening. It promotes your fire not getting smothered, but it still keeps everything together so that you have all of that fuel, there's still plenty of room for the oxygen, and you still have a space to put your tinder bundle in so that you can provide your ignition and heat. So now we've got our teepee fire set up. Now we need to light it. So as you can probably see, I've got a little hollow right in here. So I'm going to put my tinder bundle now. Try to get it right in the center of that, with enough space exposed so that I can light it. When lighting it, you want to be aware of any wind that might be coming. Right now there's a very gentle wind to my back, which is great because it means I'm already kind of naturally blocking it. You want to light your match close to your fuel, because if you light it, far away, you then have to have all this time where your match can go out, and, well, it probably will. And when you light your match, move slowly. Matches are delicate and careful little flowers, and we must be aware of that. So I've got strike anywhere matches. It's the ones with a little white tip on the head, and that means that both chemicals needed to create heat are on it. I'm going to strike that on a rock here. Let it burn a bit, and put to our tinder, which, especially on a day like today, is going up crazy fast. I'm going to squish everything a little closer together before the fire gets too big. And now, that fire is burning. You can see each element is kind of lighting. Once the tinder lit, which was almost immediate, the wispy started lighting. At this point, I can already tell my pencils are starting to light, and because the pencils are lighting, that's providing enough heat for the thumbs to blacken and burn as well. And already we have what looks like a really beautiful campfire. Hopefully you gathered more wood than just those 3 piles, since that's all you need for ignition, but not all you need to keep a fire going all night. But now you've got your fire, now you've got enough fuel for it to burn for a little while, and if you need to get more, you can get more. This is roaring. I'm going to move this wooden block / fire hazard away. And that is how to make a one-match fire.